The Little Ice Skater. Grace glided across the ice, spun on her toes, then slid to a halt beside the rest of the class. Grace was the youngest pupil in the class, but she was already skating better than most of them. "Well done, Grace. Well done, everyone," smiled Mrs. Hobbs, the teacher. "Now don't forget that we're holding auditions for parts in the Swan Lake next week." "Do you think Grace is going to be trying out for the Swan Lake?" Grace's eyes lit up. The Swan Lake was a lovely story. It was all about a princess called Odette, who was turned into a swan by a wicked magician. Each night Odette became human for a few hours, and one night she fell in love with the prince Siegfried. Downley Academy of Ice Skating was going to perform it on ice, and Grace's mom had promised to take her to the auditions. On the day of the auditions, Grace and her mom arrived at the ice rink early. "You're bound to get a part," said Grace's mom. But Grace wasn't so sure. The other girls and boys were all so much older than she was. Grace watched Felicity Keeble glide across the ice on one leg. "I wish I could skate like that," she sighed. "But you can," said her mom, giving her a quick hug. "Do you think Grace is going to get a part in the play?" "Mom," said Grace, rolling her eyes and smiling. Felicity Keeble was Downley Academy's star pupil. There was no way Grace would ever skate as well as Felicity. By the time it was Grace's turn to skate, she was a bundle of nerves. Her tummy fluttered with butterflies, and her knees felt like jelly. She was sure that she was going to make a fool of herself. But as the music began to play, everything changed. She forgot all about everyone else and skated brilliantly. "Lovely," said Mrs. Hobbs, but Grace still didn't expect to get a part. She clapped her hands as Felicity Keeble was given the part of Odette. Then she blinked in surprise as she was told that she was able to be Felicity's understudy. "That means if Felicity falls ill or anything, you have to play the part of Odette," explained her mom. "Do you think that Grace is excited to be Felicity's understudy?" Grace took her role as understudy very seriously. She practiced alongside Felicity whenever she could, following her around the rink like a shadow, and when Felicity wasn't around, Grace practiced alone. She also made sure that her mom took her along to every rehearsal together. They watched Felicity and the rest of the cast glide through the routines. Grace thought Felicity was wonderful. She skates like a princess. She told her mom, "She is going to be perfect as Odette. I hope nothing happens to her. I know I wouldn't be half as good." "Do you think something will happen to Felicity?" After weeks and weeks of practice, the day of the dress rehearsal arrived. The ice rink was full of laughter and chatter, as well as girls and boys glided around in their splendid costumes. Grace couldn't help feeling just the tiniest bit left out as she watched Felicity and the other girls skate around dressed as beautiful swans. She imagined she was out there with them. "One day that will be me," she thought, and then she sat back and watched Felicity skate her way through the last act. When Felicity made her final spin, Grace sat forward and got ready to clap, but as Felicity landed, her blades wobbled, and she fell to the ground with a thud. "Oh no, Grace. Oh no," gasped Grace, leaping to her feet. "Are you okay, Mrs. Hobbs?" asked Felicity. "Yes, I think so," replied Felicity, but when she tried to walk, she let out a yelp. "Ouch!" she cried. "I think I've twisted my ankle." Mrs. Hobbs felt Felicity's ankle, then shook her head. "It's not too bad, but you'll have to rest it for a couple of days. I don't think you'll be able to skate on opening night." What will we do? Asked Jake, the boy who was playing Prince Siegfried. We can't perform the Swan Lake without Odette. A hush fell over the ice rink. Everyone knew he was right. They would have to cancel the show. But what about Grace? Asked Felicity. Breaking the silence, all eyes on Grace. Grace did her best to hide behind her mom. What about it? Asked Mrs. Hobbs. Will you do it? Do you think Grace will take the part as the understudy? Grace gulped nervously and wished that the ground would swallow her up. There was no way that she could play Odette. But on the other hand, she couldn't let everyone down. She took a deep breath, counted to 10, and then nodded her head. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. The show will go on. Do you think Grace will do good playing opening night? That night, after she had gone to bed, Grace tossed and turned beneath her covers. Silly thoughts whirled through her head. What would happen if she forgot her steps? What would happen if she tripped and fell? What would happen if everyone thought she was rubbish? It was no good. There was no way she could sleep. Grace climbed out of bed and went over to the window. Stars twinkled in the moonlight sky. Suddenly, something caught Grace's eye. It was a shooting star. Quickly, Grace made a wish. I wish I had something that would make me feel more confident, something that would help me skate as gracefully as Felicity. Then, feeling suddenly tired, Grace fell into bed. Within seconds, she was asleep. One night, on the night of the opening performance, Grace sat quietly in the corner of the changing room as the other boys and girls got ready. She looked down at her beautiful costume and sighed. She might look like a star, but she certainly doesn't feel like one. Why do you think Grace doesn't feel like a star? Grace tried to stand up, but her legs weren't working. They felt worse than jelly. Her eyes prickled with tears. I can't do it. She thought, I can't play Odette. I'm going to let everyone down. 5 minutes until opening act, called Mrs. Hobbs. The other boys and girls thundered out of the changing room. Suddenly, Grace's mom popped her head around the changing room door. I've got a visitor for you, she announced. Grace blinked back her tears as Felicity limped into the room. Felicity took one look at Grace's pale face and flopped down beside her. I've come to wish you good luck, she smiled. Felicity put her arm around the smaller girl. Shall I let you in on a little secret, she whispered. I used to get really nervous. You should have seen me. My knees would knock together and my feet wouldn't do as they were told. But then my mom gave me this. She reached around her neck to show Grace the shiny pendant. Grace's lips wobbled and words gushed out of her mouth. I can't go out there and skate in front of all those people, she told Felicity. It's no good. Look, I'm shaking with nerves. I can't even stand up. Do you think Grace goes out there and does it? When Grace looked more closely, she saw that it was a tiny silver skating boot. It's a lucky charm, explained Felicity. When I'm wearing this, I know that everything's going to be all right. And look, she added, pulling something out of her pocket, I've got one for you. As Felicity fastened the charm around her neck, Grace smiled for the first time that evening. Her fears began to melt away, and she began to feel excited. A few tiny butterflies still fluttered in Grace's tummy, and she slid onto the ice, but as soon as the music began, they disappeared completely. When Grace was dressed as Princess Odette and she danced like a real princess, and when she was dressed as a swan, she danced like a swan. In what seemed to Grace like no time at all, the performance came to an end. As she made her final curtsy, the rink erupted with applause. Grace beamed with delight. She's done it. Grace glanced around the rink until she saw Felicity. She was standing next to Grace's mom, clapping harder than anyone else. "Thank you," mouthed Grace. "Thank you for my lovely Lucky Charm." The end.